Hello, this is Eric Ahrens with the University of California speaking about Excel for business statistics. This is one of my classroom activities in which I introduce the topic of linear regression and functions in Excel for creating a scatter chart and trend line. I will include an example from the stock market. Let's begin with definitions. First, linear regression is an equation that expresses the linear relationship between two variables. It's often represented by y equals mx plus b plus e, where m is the slope of the line, b is its y-intercept, and e is the error term, if any. Correlation is a measure of the strength of the linear relationship between two variables. This is often represented by R. Trend line is a line that represents the long-term movement in time series data. Forecast, a principal purpose of linear regression is to predict or estimate the value of one variable from known or assumed values of related variables. My rule of thumb is to forecast no more than half the range. If the values run from 100 to 500, then the range is 400, and I would only forecast out to 700 because 500 plus 200 equals 700. That's half the range out into the future. The S&P 500 is a list compiled by the Standard & Poor's Company of the top 500 stocks in the U.S. stock market. You can invest in index funds that only buy shares in stocks of the S&P 500. I will use the S&P 500 as an example. Okay, let's take a look at some calculations with Excel. First, notice that I have some data already keyed in here. And it's the S&P 500 closing price for December, January, February, March, April, and May. So, and I took it from the 15th of each of these months. So on May 15th, it closed at 1871. Let's take a look at where I got that. So if you go to Bloomberg.com, you'll find the S&P 500 right on the front page. I'm going to click into it. And when I go down a bit, you'll see they have this chart. And this was the price of the S&P 500 throughout the day. But I can also look at this by the month or by the year. So I'm going to go by the year. And as we look at this trend line, you can see it's been trending up all year long. And right now, I have set the line on May 15th. And we see that the closing price was 1871. I can bring this back to April 15th. And we see the closing price that day was 1843. So that's where I got the data that I have in my spreadsheet. Here's the 1871, the 1843, etc. Okay, now what I want to do is highlight my data. And I want to go up here and insert a scatter chart. So I'm going here to this mark scatter chart. And now we see that Excel is displaying the 6 data points for us. So it goes from the 1787 up to the 1871. And for the months, it has them spaced out as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Next, I want to go up to these quick chart layouts and slide through these. And you notice the one here has an FX on it. That's the one that calculates the trend line. It does the linear regression calculations for us. When I click it, it draws the trend line. It shows me my equation for it, y equals mx plus b. In this case, it's y equals 12.1x plus 1799. And it gives me my r squared value of 0.60984. So let's start with that. Recall that's our correlation. So I'm going to calculate the correlation from this. So I'm going to put equals square root of 0.60984. And so we see our R value is 0.7809. The closer to 1 this number is, the better the straight line fits through the points. In this case, we see this December number is pretty low, so that's kind of dragging the line down a little bit, and that's why it's not a more perfect fit through the points as a straight line. All right, next, recall I said that my rule of thumb was to forecast half the data distance and half the range into the future. So that would be 3 months in this case, since we have 6 months worth of data. So I'm going to calculate then my y value at 9. So that's going to equal the 12.1 times 9 plus 1799. And so we got a number of 1708. And so I'll just remind you that's this equation up here, 12.1x plus 1799. I also want to calculate a year into the future because I'm going to use this to calculate the annual return. So for this I need y at 13. So 12.1 times 13 plus 1799, and so that number is 1956. Now to calculate the annual percentage return, I'm going to need that number, that y at 13. So this equals, and that's in cell D21, minus up here cell C3 for December, divided by C3. And so we see that our annual rate of return is 9.5%, but it's showing here as a decimal, so let's put it into percentages. So we're going to format that cell, put it to percentage, and now it's showing us our 9.47% return. Okay, so hope that all makes sense and that you'll practice and be able to repeat that. Let's take a look at a couple of notes here. If we were investing in the S&P 500, we would want to check this trend line regularly to make sure it's not going down, in which case we would maybe want to consider selling our stock instead of staying in the stock market. Also, we want to keep in mind that changes by the Federal Reserve or world events always influence the stock market, and a trend line is long-term, whereas these may be short-term events. So we have to keep that in mind also when we're forecasting. We always have to analyze our work. Okay, hope you found this interesting. Thanks for listening.